Everyone knows how extremely difficult it is make a club truly successful without a pedigree and starting almost from scratch. It took Manchester City 16 long seasons to finally win the Champions League after all sorts of massive investments. As for PSG, the French club is still waiting in the wings. But there is one process which is even harder. Build a world-class national league without long-standing traditions, basically from zero. Very few even dared to think about it in the past. Needless to say that no one has succeeded. As of now, the task looks even tougher, given that the elite group of championships was formed for decades and has been verified time after time. Spanish, English, German, Italian, and French leagues have a vast array of assets, starting with big, in some cases astronomical, TV contracts and high-profile footballers, and finishing with dozens millions of viewers who used to watch the concrete teams and players and hotly anticipate their appearance on the screen. The newcomers, no matter how rich they are deprived of these pluses originally, and therefore are doomed to be in a losing position for years. Earning of credibility and respect is tricky enough for a separate footballer or club, but with regards to a whole competition, it is infinitely trickier. It takes several seasons at least in order to come to the fore and amass a substantial auditory, and then, as a result, sign a profitable TV contract. Before that, the struggle and financial losses are inevitable, and not many are patient and fortunate enough in order to overcome this developmental disease. When in the mid-1970s the forgotten Nessel project suddenly, almost out of the blue, started to rapidly gain prominence both in the USA and on the planet, it was much easier to succeed in theory. Back then, the popularity of club football was far from absolute, and the newly born program, albeit on paper it has been launched in 1967, was freed from the need to compete with the established and powerful brands. What to say if back at the time any National League game, even in the form of extended highlights that has been broadcasted on TV, was treated by football fans as a small miracle, even in the countries like Italy, England or Spain. The proverbial lack of interest to the sport, or so-called soccer in the USA, presented a much bigger problem, but paradoxically enough, initially this issue brought an opposite effect. The element of surprise and banal curiosity induced by the exotic got the upper hand at first, especially when in 1975 the New York Cosmos signed the most famous footballer in the world in the form of Pelé, who came out of semi-retirement. The group of other veteran legends, headed by Franz Beckenbauer, Johann Cruyff and Gerd Müller, soon followed the Brazilians' footsteps, and for several seasons to come, the Nessel turned into the League of Stars, albeit the old ones. In those years, the organizers have been able to collect 5 Ballon d'Or laureates in total. Let's not forget about Eusebio, who came there even before Pelé, and George Best, in one prolonged competition within a short period of time, which was completely unheard of back to the distant era. But the worldwide lack of club football's popularity and means of communication so characteristic for that epoch, Boomerang hit the project, because those people in Europe who wanted to follow the spectacle had very little opportunity to do so in any shape or form, let alone on air. As for the interest of American public, it cooled off rather quickly and dramatically when the show invariably turned from exotic to routine. On top of that, the league was built hastily and in many aspects has been left unprepared. One simple fact: in the space of 10 years, only 36 NASL games were broadcasted on the national TV, and none in the last 3 seasons. As for the average attendance, it grew little by little for a while, but the rather modest 14,500 spectators per contest in 1980 remains the best result. On top of that, the project has been pretty much unlucky in terms of timing. Based on famous and venerable veterans, it at a certain point stopped to bring new marquee names in, while the old ones retired one after another. The truth is that in the late 1970s, Europe and South America generated very few upcoming stars, and all of them were too young to travel overseas. In addition, right at the time, on the old continent, the prices on players started to grow exponentially, and hence the salaries as well, so NASL couldn't seduce high-profile footballers by lucrative contracts anymore. Meanwhile, in America itself, ice hockey with the arrival of the young Wayne Gretzky, and basketball with the start of the famous Larry Bird vs. Magic Johnson rivalry, were swiftly gaining additional popularity, and combined with the ever-prominent baseball and American football, they simply left no room for soccer, neither on TV nor in the minds of fans. As a consequence, the vast majority of the league clubs became unprofitable, and in 1984 the NASL was urgently folded. In 1996, the National Soccer Championship in the USA has been restored in the less pretentious form and under a new brand, MLS. This project proved to be steadier and better thought out, but at the same time it definitely lost the flair and ambitiousness of the predecessor. By the mid-1990s, all European main leagues were already so mighty and influential that it was pretty tough to fight with them, even in the particular case of veteran stars. It's pretty telling that MLS, for its quarter-century history, attracted less big-name players than NASL did within a much shorter span. The J-League, the other noteworthy project, was slightly luckier in this sense. The Japanese launched it 3 years earlier, in 1993, when the level of competition was significantly lower. In many aspects, the early steps of the J-League were similar to the NASL. Like the USA in the 1970s, Japan, the other country with colossal financial potential, enormous human resources, and high quality of life, by the early 1990s, had only a semi-amateur version of football, and even didn't qualify for the World Cup back then, while the Americans, despite their well-documented contempt for football, reached the World Cup semi-final in 1930 and got a legendary, almost mystical victory over England in 1950 in the same tournament. Meanwhile, the degree of interest to football in the land of the rising sun wasn't too bad even in those remote times. For instance, Tokyo used to host the game for the Intercontinental Cup from 1980 onwards, and in the early 1990s, the Japanese TV started to broadcast the matches of the Italian Serie A, and at times showed them more frequently than the Italian media industry itself. So the stage was set, and when in 1992 the Japanese decided to invest heavily in the forming of the J-League in order to strengthen the national football, the seeds have spread to the fertile soil. Within the next 3-4 years, the new championship attracted a bunch of stars, and in terms of the quality of foreign players, Japan was behind only Italy, Spain, and arguably Germany along with France. The catch was really good and included best goal scorers of the past two World Cups in Gary Lineker and Salvatore Schillaci, several World Cup winners both from Germany and Brazil, plus the legendary Zica, who reached the age of 40 by that time though. Indeed, always footballers well past their peak, otherwise they wouldn't agree to travel to Japan even in exchange for big money and comfortable life, but altogether they definitely increase the popularity and level of play in the country, to such degree that nowadays Japan are a perennial participant of the World Cup final stage since 1998, only the eternal grandees, Brazil, Germany, Argentina, Spain, France and England, plus Mexico, were able to qualify each time over the specified period, and a force to be reckoned with. As for the J-League, the rapid progress made way for stagnation quite soon, despite all the Japanese soundness. If at first the main obstacles for further improvement were the quota for foreigners, only 3 of them could be on the pitch simultaneously, and too compact league, the Japanese started with just 10 clubs. In 1996, after the notorious Bosman case, the competition with big European clubs became almost impossible. On top of that, the cost of TV contracts in Italy, Spain, England and Germany started to grow exponentially, leading to explosion on the market, both in terms of sums of transfers and salaries. Against this backdrop, it has to be said that the above-mentioned events coincided with the economic slump of the land of the rising sun. The Japanese resigned to their fate and laid aside the Napoleon's plans. Since that point, the J-League is a colorful and reasonably interesting competition, but without claim to world dominion. And the fact that from time to time somebody from the Asian stars wanders there just vindicates the truth of this statement. After that, for basically 3 decades, all the pretenders, both potential and real, were in this unenviable position, trying to compete with 5 major national leagues in the world for at least a piece of attention and popularity, but to no avail. The prestige, traditions, auditory accumulated for many years, and financial power of the elite group of championships prevailed each time. Uzbekistan in the late 2000s and China in the mid-2010s spent large sums of money in pursuit of enhancement of the status, but eventually gained very little. All that the Chinese have been able to achieve lure a few particularly focused on money Brazilians, headed by Oscar, Hulk Paulinho and Alex Teixeira. Plus, they managed to attract 2 old World Cup winning coaches in the form of Marcello Lippi and Luis Felipe Scolari. As for the Uzbeks, their accomplishments have been limited even more severely. Only the decorated Rivaldo at the age of 36 and the very same Scolari, who throughout his boundless managerial career hasn't been shy at all of traveling to exotic countries in order to enrich himself, dared to come there. Both Uzbekistan and China failed to make their football a profitable and worldwide product. Both hardly conquered fresh viewers. The Uzbeks, however, have been able to make their national team slightly more competitive, but that is pretty much it. It's tempting to classify to the same category the current Saudi splash of activity, but there are some major differences. Firstly, the local league historically has more quality and legacy. In fact, it was there or thereabouts for ages, stealing some high-profile experienced footballers from time to time. Secondly, the ongoing burst has surpassed all expectations, As you can easily see, with regards to transfer spending, the Saudi Pro League is a legitimate top project, and by the end of August could even improve its position in this sense, given that the Neymar's transfer is in the pipeline. The Saudis managed to invite an entire unit of big players. Cristiano Ronaldo stands alone even among them. It's pretty curious that today the domestic league can boast of having more Ballon d'Or winners than Europe, 2 versus 1, bearing in mind that Karim Benzema, the reigning holder of the prize, recently surprisingly followed Cristiano's examples. The old continent could answer to that only with Luka Modric's name. It's pretty amusing that the evergreen Croat has been tempted by the implausibly generous Saudis as well, but rejected their proposal in favor of another campaign at Real Madrid. It's worth adding that along with Benzema, the Saudi Pro League managed to recruit Sadio Mane, who was a runner-up in the last year's Ballon d'Or voting, and this makes us remember the times of Nestle. Such mass exodus of star players from Europe was not absurd for almost half a century. And here is the reason number 3. The lion's share of local top clubs in Spain and Italy in particular financially weakened after the coronavirus outbreak and already showed their vulnerability. This circumstance evidently puts the Saudi teams in an advantageous position. But the league has its share of issues too. The biggest obstacle at the moment is how to make this project liquid. Right now, all the massive expenditures look artificial and do not promise any substantial profit in the future. Everything is based on sheer enthusiasm so far. The enormous investments are aiming to promote the football in the country and worldwide in the best possible way in order to host the World Cup in 2030. The Saudis are bidding for it. Evidently, the stunning win over Argentina in Qatar also played its role, drastically increasing inspiration and appetite in this regard. As concerns the building of secure financial model or pyramid, it appears that no one is thinking about it in Saudi Arabia. Here are some distinctive examples. The official channel Saudi Pro League on YouTube, conducted by SSCTV, has only 186,000 subscribers, dozens of times less than the appropriate channels of the major European leagues. As for broadcasting, things are looking brighter. At least the competition in which Cristiano Ronaldo is currently playing is transmitted in Germany, France, Italy, and, surprise, surprise, Portugal. But many vital countries and regions, the likes of UK, Spain, USA, Russia, Japan, and China, remain unaffected. And as far as I know, the league's management is actively working in this direction. The problem is that even if all the contracts will be signed, the numbers will be quite far from those that are featuring in the same arrangements of the Premier League, Primera, Bundesliga, Serie A, and League One. In order to bridge the gap, let alone reach their level, the Saudi Pro League should earn additional credibility and attention, and it's a matter of 2-3 years at least. The same goes for the work with sponsors. Maybe it would be easier to develop the social media, because this process is traditionally more dynamic. The absence of prestigious and profitable international club tournament is another chink in the armor of top Saudian clubs. The Asian Champions League by any means cannot be compared to its European analog. So even the amortization of large spending through the prize money will be a chore, and this puts the question mark next to the project. The pure sporting component looks dubious also. Let's not forget that tempting a lot of big-name players the Saudis didn't manage to entice even greater amount of stars. Okay, Neymar is almost ready to say yes to Al Hilal, but besides Modric, Lionel Messi, Kylian Mbappé, Paul Pogba, Joao Felix, Romelu Lukaku, Victor Osimhen, Robert Lewandowski, Sergio Busquets, Jordi Alba, and many other high-profile footballers denied the opportunity to play in the league that is gaining momentum and could make them even wealthier. Of course, some of them, especially Lukaku and Joao Felix, could change their mind under the pressure of circumstances, but the tendency is more than apparent. The reality is that plenty of players simply don't want to live in a country with specific and at times brutal laws and regulations. The same applies to head coaches. It's pretty telling that the contingent of foreign managers is much inferior to the congregation of footballers if they talk about loudness of names. For sure, head coaches are less numerous by definition, but anyway, the quality of those who are currently laboring in the Saudi Arabia could hardly impress. Jorge Jesus, the old lover of combinational game, perhaps is the best of them. Nuno also had his moments at Valencia and Wolverhampton, but the skills of the others looks suspicious, to say the least. Moreover, it's highly unlikely that they both, let alone their less skillful colleagues, will be working in Saudi Arabia for years and patiently develop their respective projects. The rule, which allows registering a total of 8 foreign players over the course of the season, leaves a wide margin for various maneuvers, but the truth is that in any truly respectable national league, the domestic footballers make a core which sometimes defines the overall level more than the visiting stars. The latest World Cup demonstrated that there are some decent players in Saudi Arabia, but they should be triple in number in order to really improve the quality of the tournament. These are hard tasks, and the fact that they must be addressed in parallel makes them even more difficult. One thing is for certain: following the Chinese footsteps and just signing expensive players, even if their quality is significantly higher, won't get you anywhere. The business part of the process, which includes TV rights, social media and all sorts of related activity, work with partners and sponsors, plus constant search of the fresh viewers, is equally important. The following 2-3 years will define the character and true colors of the Saudi project, whether it is a legitimate success or a common soap bubble. In the latter scenario, we will understand everything even sooner though.